Where foreign troops have failed, could drones and mercenaries succeed? As Haitian officials struggle to defeat gangs who've taken over the capital, the government enlists controversial foreign military contractors to fight their war. But can the likes of Eric Prince and former Blackwater operators bring stability to Haiti or more trauma to civilians? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Haiti. Well, for millions of Haitians, the violence and instability in their country continues to hit new lows. A fragile, unelected government is the only body with authority to fight the armed groups who've taken over the capital almost entirely. It was hoped police forces brought in from Kenya could curb some of the violence, but instead, gangs have increased their territory in Port-au-Prince. It's led the government to employ more controversial options. And those include foreign mercenaries and weaponized drones organized by private U.S. military contractors with a controversial past. So will it work? Here's a look.
In Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, the battle for control is no longer just on the ground. The skies now hum with drones sent to strike gangs that have overrun the city. Since March, the government has used explosive drones to target gang strongholds. In a bid to escalate its firepower, Haiti has also turned to Eric Prince, the founder of the notorious Blackwater firm, to lead covert drone operations and recruit foreign mercenaries. Prince's operatives have been flying drones since March, but while the technology has added reach, the human cost is mounting. Reports that around 300 gang members have been killed by the drones, as well as potentially hundreds more injured. A success in the eyes of the government. But amid the wider violence that's cast its net across Haiti are constant civilian reminders that this drone war is not without devastating consequences.
Caught in the middle of this unending horror story are the Haitian people, who are at the mercy of horrific violence by gangs and exposed to human rights violations from the security forces, as well as abuses by the so-called self-defense groups.
For civilians, the toll is crushing. 1 in 10 Haitians is now displaced.
The Prime Minister said there were 3 priorities: public safety, the election, and the referendum. What I can see is that crime has replaced these 3 priorities, with levels of suffering that we could not imagine.
And while the government escalates its offensive, gangs are evolving. First to use drones for surveillance, they now deploy them for propaganda, and possibly for attack. This drone war, largely unregulated and waged in urban slums, has turned Port-au-Prince into a high-tech frontline, where lines between aggressor and defender blur. On the streets, anger simmers. As gangs advance, locals have taken up arms.
This is the only Haiti we have. This flag is our flag. They will not cast us out.
Foreign boots are back on the ground. Kenyan officers assist Haitian police as part of a UN-backed mission. But even with international support, 85% of the capital remains under gang control. For diplomats, the solution lies in rebuilding state institutions, not in drone strikes.
We cannot dismiss the need to strengthen Haiti's institutions and the need to make progress in order to hold elections when conditions allow. The mandate of the UN Integrated Office in Haiti continues to be crucial in supporting the Haitian authorities along this path, strengthening the promotion of human rights, the rule of law, and political dialogue.
Haiti's war has taken to the skies. But for those still trapped below, survival is fought on foot.
So can the use of weaponized drones and mercenaries bring armed gangs to heel in Haiti, or could they increase civilian suffering? Well, joining me now to debate that and much more are from Port-au-Prince, Chief of Staff for the Presidential Council of Haiti, Mathias Pierre, From London, specialist in drone warfare and PhD candidate in war studies at King's College London, Zachary Kallenborn. And from Washington, founder and executive director of Haiti Policy House, Wolf Pamphile. Thanks all so much for being with me. You know, names like Eric Prince and Blackwater, right or wrong, they immediately tend to evoke images of innocents being killed, whether in Iraq or elsewhere, as well as, you know, human rights abuses on behalf of mercenaries who won't be held accountable. Yet, Wolf, we're hearing many Haitians are welcoming this new strategy really out of total desperation. So is this the only way that they actually have to fight fire with fire, as it's said?
It's a tough decision. I think if you take the name Eric Prince out of the equation, and I don't think any the reaction from the population of the international world is as provocative, I would say. But I think when we're thinking about Haiti, especially today, we have to find solutions, 21st century solutions for 21st century problems. Because in Haiti, you have complete territories where the police can't enter, the police can't do anything about, can't even drive through. And yesterday I was watching a video where the police were on a patrol with the Kenyan police, and the whole patrol ended because they had a flat tire. And how is this supposed to be, if a flat tire can stop a whole patrol, then how are you supposed to be able to penetrate these territories, spend hours in action trying to dismantle a gang-held territory? I think the drones are a new way of handling the gang issue. I think, unfortunately, I believe Eric Prince comes in with his own baggage of political baggage and a dog past when it comes to these kinds of organizations. But I think at the same time, Haiti stand to gain from at least the battle against the gangs, tend to move forward in terms of hindering them effectively.
Right. It's interesting you say, 21st century solutions for 21st century problems, 21st century warfare. I mean, Zachary, is that fair? And is it legal to be doing this? What are the real risks here? Will they ultimately kill innocent people that otherwise would have been safe? Or are these people that would have been in just the same amount of danger anyway without the potential upside of eliminating the gangs here?
There are absolutely real risks, especially when we're talking about urban warfare in general. When civilians are all over the place, having very precise control is always going to be difficult, whether you're using drones, police, military, other types of forces. Now, that said, drones can add, I think, some actually real benefit, as you saw in the video, where you had direct cameras showing here's what's going on the ground so that operators can make adjustments and address. Ultimately, though, it's about the operators, what their decision making is, what their training is, what their intelligence looks like about what's happening on the ground. And that's just as true if we're talking about drones as if we're talking about any type of armed operation.
But when you talk about the operators, explain that. I mean, do you mean Eric Prince, former Blackwater? Because let's be honest, there aren't many experts in this field of fighting in unconventional warfare, of fighting gangs that have infiltrated, taken over an entire capital city. So where does that leave your option for operators if you're the government of Haiti, for example?
If you mean armed, you mean on the ground operators?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah. So in terms of on the ground operators, your options are going to potentially be fairly limited. So, when we're talking about the use here, to a large extent, we are talking about Blackwater and the folks under their command. I assume that Eric Prince probably doesn't do much personal fighting himself, but certainly that would be the challenge, and to what degree the folks that they employ and they use are trained and engaged with this. That said, when it comes to drones, we've certainly seen rapid development and and proliferation understanding of how exactly those operate in many different theaters of warfare, from Ukraine to Armenia, Azerbaijan, to what's going on in North Africa. And to some degree, the issues that we're talking about here are not necessarily unique to drones. That is, it's a question of, you're in an area and you recognize, oh, that person who's wearing a suit and a jacket and a shirt, that's probably not a military adversary. By contrast, someone, armed who's carrying maybe in camouflage, maybe less so. The challenge in this particular case is if we're talking about gangs, they don't necessarily wear that sort of clear identification. And that's a fundamental problem no matter who's doing the fighting.
Okay, Matthias, let's get the government's view from you then, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have said the use of drones and mercenaries is actually mostly symbolic. How so?
But I think it's, talking about drone, I'm not an expert in drone and warfare, but what you can understand is one element into the fight. And most importantly, what is missing is inside of the government. Actually, I'm working with one of the presidents. Remember, we have 9 presidents and a prime minister. We need to have the whole government head aligned in a strategy to fight the gangs. And to understand one thing, you have the police, you have the MMS, which is the International Kenyan Force, and we have the army. And 3 different entities equipped, and some of them, like the National Police and the army, are not well equipped. You need to have a strategy coordination between those 3, and the warfare should be an element inside of that strategy. To say, okay, those are the territories that has been captured by the gangs, and how we're gonna go one after another to get some success. And based on this success, we move and conquer back the territories that have been occupied by the gangs. I think that's what is, that's where the problem is for now. And I think there's time, because remember, we are in a transitional government. We need to move and organize election. While we're doing that, while we're fighting the gangs, we need to show clearly how we're going to get into the elections. And one of the aspects of it, that is very important. Gangs leaders are recruiting people and young people from the population because there's lack of jobs. Because there is economic situation, because some of them, they are being paid. Imagine a young guy accept the fact of being recruited by a gang leaders and knows in any moment he can die just because to make some money. So the government need on the other side to create some economic incentives for these recruiting to reduce, for young people to find works to do, and then discourage them from getting into gangs. I think that's what needs to happen. We need some leadership on the top of the government so this strategy can be put in place so we can move forward.
Okay, but let me come back to Wolf at this point. I mean, of course, effective government is always desperately needed, but right now, especially in the capital, Haiti is in no condition to be holding an organized election. So when will there be an elected government in place that can properly coordinate between all the parties and interests involved? And I mean, are Haitians even interested in having an opportunity to vote at this point, or do they just want the chaos to end in whatever way possible?
I mean, if you ask Haitians to choose between elections and security right now, they'll probably choose security. And elections are supposed to be, they're supposed to have an election, next year in 2026? And I'm not sure if the government, the country, or even the civilians in their mind to think about a candidate that they would vote for at the moment. Because technically we don't, personally, I don't know anyone who is saying, hey, they want to run for office or actually campaigning to become president in Haiti, and let alone have an election in a couple of months. Now, again, I'm going to go back to my previous statement where I said 21st century solution for 21st century problems, because to think that Port-au-Prince will be fully open to have an election in a few months is, it's kind of impossible to think about, right? Unless there's like some major move, some major operation that comes out to push the gangs out. But at the pace that we are going at the moment, I don't think it's feasible. But what are the technologies, again, that can allow us to have an election, whether it is like remote voting, whether it is using voting by phone or different technologies? And again, how do you set up a space within Port-au-Prince where voting can happen, where you have 1.3 million people who are displaced? How do they vote? Where do they go to vote? These are all questions that the government needs to figure out. And I think having someone or a team that is like technologically like focused about solutions like that would pay dividends to the strategic planning of the country moving forward.
Quickly, Matthias, having said that, you're talking about the lack of coordination between the leadership that is in place right now and the various interests involved. And then we know the police have also been accused, and that's the main security force in Haiti right now, of so much corruption and even complicity in the killing of civilians. So how do you even begin to coordinate security at the government and the forces that are there? I mean, even before you can even begin talking about elections, don't you have to get that structure in place to coordinate with what you have to work with? And then campaigning would have to be held? Where does this even start?
I like to say that election is not or, it's security and election. Because what happened, you just mentioned corruption, you just mentioned a weak police. All these are linked to the fact that we don't have a legitimate government. And a legitimate government can be in place by the only means in election. Remember, we have 10 departments, and Port-au-Prince is one city inside of one department, certainly which is the biggest one, but one. Certainly, we are part of another region, the Artibonite region, who is occupied by gangs, but also technology is available, so we could organize elections by electronic voting in some areas where this is impossible for people to go to vote. But again, I don't disagree that we need to work on security. We need to reinforce, restructure the police force. We need to structure the army and certainly see what is the best way for the MMS who is on the Kenyans who are actually here, how they can collaborate within the police and the army to have effective solution to the problem of security that we're having now.
It's just
and we need to work it out.
Yeah, it's such a tremendous amount to tackle. Let me come back to Zachary and how it's being fought right now. You know, we're hearing that foreign troops have failed, so could foreign mercenaries and drones actually help succeed? I mean, part of the mercenary force is meant to be Haitian American fighters. So would they have more of an interest in succeeding here? Would they be more dedicated to the cause because it is their own country? Or are mercenaries always just risky and the lack of accountability makes civilians particularly vulnerable?
I don't see anything inherently risky with mercenaries itself. It really depends on sort of who they are, their training, how they operate. You could have a bad mercenary set that came from a particular country and has strong connives, but they have bad training, they don't have considerations for human rights, or other types of factors which might be awful. In other cases, it really depends on the particular type of context. I do think, having that connection to the country absolutely can help in terms of just understanding sort of the geopolitical or in the social and economic sort of context of what's happening. But it doesn't necessarily preclude. Obviously, we've had plenty of military and police forces that have also, unfortunately, had made various human rights abuses over the years throughout the world.
Quickly, Zachary, explain, though, from the military perspective or the armed group's perspective and versus the police, the government's forces, if we can call them that. Explain really who's at the foundation of this, supplying the ammunition to the gangs. Could these gangs also then get their hands on the very drones that the government is trying to use against them? They've, for example, said that they can, but then what we've seen them use drones for is more for the purpose of making social media videos. It doesn't seem they've been able to get a hold of weapons. We know 3 people as well were arrested in the Dominican Republic trying to get military-grade drones into Haiti, and that failed. Still, is the risk there that these drones will fall into the wrong hands along with the ammunition that they're apparently buying on the black market, all seemingly funded by a lot of narco trafficking as well?
Absolutely, that's a risk. I'm not super familiar with the actual arms dynamics of the gangs in this particular case, but in general, a number of organized crime groups have been able to access large amounts of weapons, ammunition, including some fairly advanced weapons off various black markets. We certainly see that in the cartels in Mexico, where they have near military-grade equipment. And that's true as well for drones. In the United States, you can go down the street and get a simple DJI Mavic, a little quadcopter for less than $1,000 or so, which can be useful for collecting intelligence information, spreading propaganda. It can also be modified to drop a bomb or have a gun. That modification now does require a little bit of technical skill, but we've seen that the Islamic State and other terrorist groups with relatively limited resources have been able to do those modifications and occasionally build drones themselves. So armed gangs using drones against police and military forces absolutely should be a concern.
Wolf, are you concerned?
Yes. I mean, as soon as I saw the first use of the drones, I knew that it kind of opened a Pandora's box. It's a delicate balance because you want to address an issue, but at the same time, it's kind of like a pendulum swing. When it goes one way, it's going to come back to you. And it's just a matter of time before one modified drone slips through the crack into Haiti, and then the gangs have, even if they have one and it's used once or twice, it's already a big issue. And I think the government itself, I mean, if you are planning these kinds of operations, you have to think about the countermeasures. If the gangs decide to use that, how do you set up counter drone operations? How do you set up the technology? I mean, the technology exists to have these things. There's technology throughout the U.S., throughout the world, that prevents certain drones from entering certain areas, and also calibrate safeguards where a drone with a specific serial number can only enter this zone here. Or they do it a lot around airports. And for the Haitian government to go along with this plan, this strategy to bomb the gangs, I think it will be beneficial for them to invest also to protect communities, especially the people who've been displaced or living in schools at the moment or churches, to protect them and set up safeguards around those areas where even if the gangs end up having drones, they can't send a drone in there because there are measures in place that protect those specific areas. I think there needs to be some no-fly drone zones in Port-au-Prince where it doesn't matter if it's a kid with a drone or a gang with a drone, you should not be able to fly a drone in there for safety reasons. And it's just the safe way to go about things.
Very quickly, because I want to get to you and Matthias before we leave about this. Is there anything that you feel right now, Wolf, is on the right track that gives you hope that perhaps Port-au-Prince can get to the status that maybe Cap-Haïtien, the second biggest city in Haiti, is at right now? Considerably safer, it's not run by gangs. Is there anything that's making you feel that those two cities can be on equal footing at any point soon?
So two things. One, I do think the drones, I monitor the gangs extensively, and I did see their reaction when the drones operation first started. And I did see potential for that if the government were to ramp it up or become more effective around it. because it's the one thing that's been able to touch the gangs at their heart at the moment. And that's the one thing that I've seen that put fear in their eyes. And the second thing is, from the regional perspective, is countries treating the folks who funded this whole gang, this whole fiasco right now, and they've fled to either Dominican Republic, the US, Panama, and recently we saw the US government arrest the Haitian elite, Reginald Boulos, who funded these gangs or created these gangs at some point.
Okay. Matthias, final question for you. The most notorious gang leader, Barbecue, of course, has said actually that he wants to talk. He somehow wants to negotiate. But help us understand from the government's perspective what parties, what individuals should even be sitting at a table if they're considering negotiations. Is that at all possible to solve Haiti's problems right now?
I think it's possible with leadership. I think it's possible if the different parts of the elites, economic, social, and certainly politics, sit together and create a strategy aligned with the actual problem that we have with the security and elections. But I don't think today it would be any productive to work with any gang leaders who's causing terrors in the population.
Okay.
It will not welcome, and I don't think any government leader will take the responsibility to act in such a manner.
Matthias Pierre, that will have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists sincerely so much for being with us. Our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.